4's here. It's a legend so deep, no one just plays it. They live it.
I don't think anyone watching this video will need an introduction to Tekken. It's one of the biggest fighting game franchises on the planet, rivaling Street Fighter in popularity, and I'd even say possibly surpassing Mortal Kombat's popularity at the moment. It's a series with many entries, 10 to be exact if you're counting the 2 tag games. Each one of them is incredibly important to not only itself, but also to the evolution of fighting games in general. And Tekken is also a series that's deeply important to me as well. Tekken was the first fighting game I was introduced to, specifically Tekken 4. It was one of the few PS2 games I had along with Jak and Daxter, Lego Star Wars, Revenge of the Sith the video game, Spider-Man the video game, and even Sonic Mega Collection. So obviously, Tekken 4 is one of my favorite fighting games ever made. Tekken 4's legacy is complicated and even controversial to the Tekken community. It's a game that made many different decisions in comparison to the games before it. Tekken 4 has this uniqueness to itself. It's a very different beast within the Tekken legacy. A game that strived to evolve, innovate, and create a whole new tone for the series. I'd even go as far to say that without Tekken 4, we wouldn't have Tekken as we know it today. In a sense, Tekken 4 is the experiment that would eventually pay off. And thus, I think that all these aspects together make Tekken 4 an underrated gem. And so in this video, I'm going to try to talk about all the things that Tekken 4 did, its developmental history, as well as give a little review on it, obviously. And with all that being said, let's start the part of the video where I talk about the game's history.
The history of the King of Iron Fist Tournament 4.
Tekken 4 was originally first being developed immediately after the release of Tekken 3. And by then, the Tekken series had already gotten a big name for itself. This was also during an era where it was well known that Namco's fighting games were somehow even better on console. Just take the reception to Tekken 3 and Soul Calibur 1 as an example of this. So imagine the shock of the development team when Namco Upper Brass tells you to develop what they're basically calling Tekken 3.5. More or less, they wanted a game that used Tekken 3's assets, so they could release a game made for cheap and make profit off of it. Thus, Harada put his Chrome dreams of Tekken 4 in the box for now and developed Tekken Tag Tournament instead. And the development for that game was finished in 2 months. Maybe it was easy since it was simply just taking characters from Tekken 2 and 3, putting them on better hardware, adding some finer details and new mechanics here and there, and then calling it a day. And after that small detour out of the way, Harada and his team could now get back to developing Tekken 4. As stated before, Tekken 4's development centered around innovation and experimentation, making many changes to the game and pushing the Tekken franchise into a new era. Everything down to the gameplay, visuals, aesthetic, and story was drastically different to the Tekken you knew before this game. The decision to change things makes a lot of sense. Tekken was already pretty successful as a franchise, and after the meteoric success of Tekken 3, why not try to change things up a bit? I mean, Tekken 3 had already done so well, and that game was drastically different to the game before it as well, even having an almost completely different roster altogether. However, this was supposedly a very stressful cycle for Katsuhiro Harada in particular. Harada had been with Tekken for years at this point, and he's still with the franchise to this day. He's sort of the overseer or overall gatekeeper of the Tekken series. He might not be the director of literally every single game, it might not even be the biggest creative voice for every game, but he's been a hand in the Tekken franchise ever since its beginning. So it's a bit of a harsh truth to learn that Tekken 4's development and reception was so stressful for him that he had to quit for some time, even supposedly leaving Namco for a year after the game was done and shipped out. For some, Tekken 4 was a failure. Yet if you do your research, it actually wasn't the worst failure in the series, at least financially. In this graph that Harada has shown here, Tekken 4 is actually tied in sales with the game that came before it, Tekken Tag Tournament, and while it never reached the major sales numbers of 3, 5, and 7, its sales number wasn't as low as Tekken Tag 2, which, side note, is a shame because Tag 2 is my favorite Tekken. It's easily my second favorite fighting game ever made. Although it is possible that Tekken 4 may have been a failure in Namco's eyes, since Tekken Tag 1 was released prior and made the same amount of revenue for less effort. It didn't help that the reception of Tekken 4 was a bit mixed, with many major game outlets and magazines at the time giving vastly different reviews, such as IGN giving the game a 9, but Edge Magazine giving the game a 6, and it's sitting with a middling 79% on Metacritic. And thus this lot put a stress on Harada's mind, though in recent years he's spoken about his feelings on the game and its reception and development, going as far to tweet this. I'll let you pause the video here and read it if you absolutely need to. However, Harada has gone on to say that Tekken 4 holds a special place in his heart. He goes on to say in this interview with none other than the Justin Wong, with translation with Michael Murray.
But he said, as far as special places, is probably Tekken 4.
Oh, okay.
Although it did well, commercially, that was really divisive, I guess, right? You know, a lot of people didn't like it at the time. And he got a lot of hate for a lot of the stuff in that game. And so it's kind of reminds him that, you know, you have to be careful on how you interpret feedback from games.
I mean, he was very innovative with the stages and like the different surroundings.
結構いろんなものを変えて、
そうね、だからあれが
新しくしようとしたけど、
あれがイノベーションとしてちゃんとそうなってればよかったんだけど、まあいろんなところで俺言ってるけど、あれそのみんなが鉄拳1、2、3とブワッと右肩上がりきてタッグも大ヒットしちゃって、結構俺が慎重になっちゃったんでね、そのあまりにも右肩上がりで調子良かったんで、すっごい逆に4の時は慎重になっちゃって、ちゃんと作ろうって思い込みすぎちゃって、で世界中からこうアンケートをいろんな会社通してやったんだけど、こう鉄拳の良くなとこはどこですかってやったら、良くないとこがいっぱい集まるわけで、それを避けるように作ったらああいう形になっちゃったんだよね。これあんまり良くない作り方なので、それはあれを作品を通して学んだって感じ。
So he was just saying that 1, 2, 3 tag really just took off and exploded.
Yeah.
So he kind of got scared. He was like, he got more conservative, but in not like a lack of innovation, but I need to like properly make this the right way. And so he said he got all the feedback from wherever he could about what he didn't like about the game, so that they could, if they could, you know, improve that part, obviously you'd have a really awesome game, right?
Yeah.
Was the thinking.
Yeah.
But it just means that you don't hear about what people like and just all the bad stuff that they don't like.
Ah, okay.
And he kind of focused on that, and that's not, in hindsight, the best way to go about making a good fighting game.
I'm glad to say that after all that stress, he's come back and learned a lot from it. But I think that's all I got to say about Tekken 4's history. I think it's time to get into the game itself.
Review of the King of Iron Fist Tournament 4.
I believe the first and most obvious thing to talk about is the gameplay, specifically the traditional fighting game combat and how it feels. And yes, I say traditional fighting game combat specifically because this game has some special modes that I'll be talking about later. As for now, the gameplay's fine. I don't think it's as smooth as, say, later games in the series, mainly because they were trying many things out, and yeah, it can be a little bit hit or miss here and there. It doesn't help that the game is pretty unbalanced, with some characters just having vastly better toolkits and movesets than others. For example, playing Steve Fox or Jin in this game feels like you're playing a much different, much easier game than if you were playing as, say, Yoshimitsu or King. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with having some characters play easier or having stronger moves than others. I speak about how I think fighting game balance should work in my UMBC3 video, but Tekken 4 is not an example of that. Though I will say that the roster itself is pretty solid. Having a roster of interesting and cool characters is an absolute necessity for any good fighting game. The Tekken series hasn't let me down so far, but Tekken 4's roster is a special highlight in this aspect, if we're not counting the tag games. A cast of mostly popular characters from Tekken 2 and 3 show up here, but revamped to fit into the new and unique style in this game, as well as adding in some great newcomers. We've got Craig Marduk, who's Tekken's take on MMA fighters, Christy, who stands in for Eddie Gordo and works as a carefree and sweet woman, and we have Combat, who in my opinion is a much more interesting copy character than Mokujin. Not that I don't like Mokujin, but I've always preferred the concept behind Combat, because why wouldn't a robot whose whole purpose to learn martial artist fighting styles would not be a copy character? And last, but certainly not least, we have the most iconic newcomer from this game, Steve Fox, who in my opinion is the best interpretation of boxing as a fighting game style we've ever gotten in a fighting game. The way he weaves in and out of moves, the fact that you can't really kick is handled so well, even in this game. Of course, Tekken 4 knew they had gold on their hands with Steve since he gets a lot of screen time in the game's intro cutscene. Speaking of characters, they would be nothing without a story. And in my honest opinion, this is the best story we've gotten in a Tekken game. The way many of the characters' stories weave together with one another is handled so expertly. When you have such a large cast of characters, the best way a writer can immediately create dynamics and drama that is engaging is to create attachments and connections with all their characters. And this doesn't just go for the Mishima storyline, which is the best it's been in this game in my opinion, but the other characters too. Steve, Lei, and Nina's story all interconnected, or how King and Marduk have a complicated rivalry with each other. or how even Combat's storyline ties into Lee's, aka Violet's, story. And sadly, I don't think Tekken stories have been this great or this layered since. I'm not saying Tekken hasn't had great story modes since. Tekken 7's main story is pretty good at developing and adding interesting elements to Heihachi's character, but eventually a lot of characters from Tekken 5 and onward would calcify and lose a lot of their development or complexity. That and Tekken 6 committed one of the biggest character assassinations I've seen of a character. Seriously, who in the writer's room thought, let's just toss out all of Jin's development in the last 3 games and make him objectively the most evil Mishima? Anyways, this brings me to the aesthetics and atmosphere of this game. And say it with me now, it's the best in the series. You didn't say it with, never mind, just forget I said anything. I think Tekken getting more gritty and dark in this entry played really well for this game. I like to describe this game's vibe as cyberpunk mysticism. What I mean is there's a lot of darker sci-fi ideas going on here, like genetic experimentation, machine learning for the use of combat, and corporate warfare being done away from the public eye. All these themes you'd probably find in many cyberpunk novels. But it's also mixed in with elements and ideas of mysticism, Jin and Kazuya literally turning into devils and dealing with their inner demons taking literal form. The story really leans into these darker ideas and elements, but what I like most about many of these stories is that they respect you as an audience. They don't give you such clean-cut answers as bad guy, good guy. The characters feel many things, and some of the characters even act selfishly a lot of the time. And to be honest, Tekken 4 might be one of the reasons why I'm such a big fan of both martial arts films and the cyberpunk genre to this day. This story really impacted me as a kid. The starting cutscene makes Kazuya seem like your traditional hero on a vengeance-filled quest. I'd seen this trope many times before, and for clarification, I hadn't played any Tekken game before this, so imagine my brain exploding when I beat Kazuya's story mode and found out he's the bad guy? Yeah, safe to say this was the third biggest twist I had experienced in any media behind Darth Vader being Luke's father and the big twist in Final Fantasy VII. No, not the Aerith one, the other one that barely anyone spoils for some reason. Of course, a major aspect of any game's vibes comes from the music, and I think Tekken 4's OST might be my favorite fighting game OST ever made. I genuinely believe that, and yes, I do like it more than Marvel vs. Capcom 3's OST. I really haven't heard a fighting game quite like it, and really nothing like it ever since, even in its own series. It's not quite the traditional dance music, drum and bass, or jungle you'd find in many PS2 games. Sure, it has those elements, but it experiments a ton. I mean, the jungle stage's theme, Didgeridoo, literally samples a didgeridoo. The only other game I think that does that is Ty the Tasmanian Tiger, and that game is morally required to do so since it's set in Australia. That'd be like setting a game primarily in the US and not using a guitar or hip-hop inspired track. Like, come on man, it's just needed. Tangent aside, this soundtrack is just really good. I don't usually listen to game OSTs when I'm out and about or working on things, but this soundtrack is one of those few exceptions. Now, do you remember when I mentioned extra game modes way back at the start of this section here? Well, let's talk about them. Tekken 4 was released in an era where it was pretty much a requirement to have at least something for single player content, and luckily Tekken is debatably the series known to have the best extra modes and side games, except Tekken 7 that made Tekken Bowling and the frame data for moves as part of paid DLC. But this is not the video for me to air out my grievances against Tekken 7. So, what do we got? Well, we've got quite a bit. We've got Time Attack, which is essentially a speedrun mode so you could beat an arcade ladder under a certain time. Survival, which is another flip on the arcade ladder, but your health amount stays generally the same between matches. And we have Time Battle, which is essentially a mode where you make a team, maximum 8 characters, and play King of the Hill, where you stick with one character till they get beat, and the team with the last character standing wins. But the greatest mode out of all of these is Tekken Force, a mode where they took the 3D fighting game combat of Tekken and translated it to a beat-em-up. And this isn't just a simple copy-paste. They took the framework that they made in Tekken 3 and didn't just up the ante, they blew it into the stratosphere. Not gonna lie, most of my time playing this game was on Tekken Force. It's just so fun and addicting. On top of that, it's an actual challenge too. It's not just as simple as spam moves then win. The AI strategizes, attacks when you're not looking, and will even jump you with multiple enemies together if the moment is right. Hell, when I was a kid, I struggled to get past the jungle stage half the time. And honestly, sometimes I still do. Maybe I suck at this mode or something, but it's a genuinely fun struggle to play. With all these things together, we get the complete package of Tekken 4. After replaying it again after all these years and writing this video, I think my appreciation for this game has grown immensely. Is it my favorite Tekken? No. Over the years I've learned that Tag 2 is my personal favorite. But this game is such a unique artistic expression, and I don't really think people talk about that enough when it comes to fighting games. I feel like we've centered a lot of our fighting game discussion and critiques around how they function as a product, about how hyped they can be, or how balanced they are, or if it just looks good. And that's not inherently a bad thing. A lot of those aspects are important to fighting games and games in general, but sometimes you gotta look behind all that and try to grasp what the development team was trying to get at. What were they trying to convey? The themes, the mechanics, the soul of the game. How does it all add together? Sure, maybe it's not the prettiest picture, and maybe it's a bit clunky at times, but I'd rather have a game be clunky because it's trying to grasp at more than have it not be fun because it was a rushed product sent into an online storefront to die for profit. And to me, Tekken 4 is the antithesis to this line of thinking. They could have easily played it safe and just given us Tekken 3 again, but better looking. But instead, Harada and his team took a big risk, completely rewriting and reworking Tekken as we know it. Sure, it got a lot of bad reception and pendulumed in sort of the opposite direction for Tekken 5, but I'll always appreciate Tekken 4 for what it is, and what it represents. Because Tekken 4 is the most unique Tekken. Tekken 4 is an unappreciated gem. And that's all I really gotta say about Tekken 4. Do you agree with the video? Do you not? Well, hey, if you did or if you didn't, comment down below. And with all that being said, I'll see you next time.